The rain was relentless, creating a constant droning noise that seemed to seep into my bones. I had always loved rainy nights, but this one was different. There was something about the way the shadows played on the walls that made me uneasy. I was alone in my new house, still getting used to the creaks and groans of its old bones. I decided to turn in early, hoping sleep would take away the unease. As I climbed the stairs, I heard a soft thudding noise coming from above. It was faint, almost like a heartbeat. The attic? I had barely been up there since moving in, and the thought of exploring it now made my skin crawl. Lying in bed, I tried to ignore the noise, but it grew louder, more insistent. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was up there, something that didn't belong. Gathering my courage, I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the attic. The wooden steps creaked under my weight as I ascended. The air grew colder, and the thudding noise became a rhythmic pounding. I reached the attic door, my hand trembling as I turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, cavernous space. I swept the flashlight around, its beam cutting through the darkness. Boxes and old furniture cast eerie shadows on the walls. The noise stopped abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence. I took a step forward, and the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. The flashlight flickered, and in its dying light, I saw them, figures emerging from the shadows. They had no faces, just empty voids where their eyes and mouths should have been. They moved silently, gliding towards me. My flashlight died completely, plunging me into darkness. I could feel them around me, their cold presence suffocating. I swung the flashlight wildly, hitting one of the figures. It recoiled, emitting a shrill, inhuman scream. I didn't stop to think. I used the flashlight as a weapon, fighting off the figures as best as I could in the pitch black. I felt a cold hand grab my arm, but I yanked free, swinging and kicking with all my might. In a frenzy, I reached the attic door, fumbling for the handle. I managed to get it open and stumbled down the stairs, the figures close behind. I ran to my bedroom, slamming the door shut and barricading it with furniture. I could hear them outside, scratching and whispering. I have trouble sleeping ever since.
It was a stormy night, the kind where the rain pounds on the roof like an army of drummers and the wind howls through the trees, making them creak ominously. I was alone in my large, old house, nestled in the outskirts of town. I was used to being alone, but something about this night felt different. The air was thick with an unsettling energy. Curled up on the couch with a cup of tea, the lights flickered. I shrugged it off as a result of the storm, but then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping. At first, I thought it was just the rain, but it grew louder and more insistent. It was coming from the kitchen. I got up, my heart pounding, and walked towards the sound. I hesitated at the kitchen door, taking a deep breath before pushing it open. The kitchen was empty, but the back door, which I was sure I had locked, was ajar. The tapping was louder now, more deliberate. Grabbing a knife from the counter, I slowly approached the door. Just as I reached out to close it, the door swung open violently, and a gust of wind blew out the candle on the table. I was plunged into darkness. I could feel a presence behind me, cold breath on my neck. I turned around, but there was nothing there. The kitchen was empty again, but the sense of being watched lingered. I bolted the door shut and ran to the living room, locking myself in. I tried to call someone, anyone, but the line was dead. I was alone, truly alone, with whatever had come into my house. The tapping resumed, this time on the living room window. With trembling hands, I pulled back the curtain. A pair of eyes stared back at me, unblinking in the darkness. A loud crash from the kitchen made me jump. I knew I couldn't stay in the living room. With the knife still in my hand, I moved cautiously back towards the kitchen, my breath shaky. As I entered, I saw a shadowy figure standing by the counter, its back turned to me. The figure was tall and slender, with unnaturally long limbs. It moved with a fluid, almost serpentine grace. I mustered all my courage and lunged at the figure, slashing with the knife. It turned swiftly, grabbing my wrist with an inhuman strength. We struggled, knocking over chairs and dishes. The figure's face was obscured by a hood, but its eyes glowed with a malevolent light. I kicked and thrashed, finally managing to free my hand. I swung the knife wildly, catching the figure on the arm. It held in pain, releasing its grip. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted for the front door, throwing it open and running into the storm. The rain was blinding, but I kept running, not daring to look back. I ran through the garden, my feet slipping in the mud, the wind tearing at my clothes. As I reached the edge of the property, I glanced back and saw the figure standing in the doorway, watching me. Its eyes still glowed, and it raised a hand, beckoning me to return. I turned and ran faster, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached the road, breathless and soaked to the bone. The storm was still raging, but the feeling of being watched had lessened. I knew I had to find help. As I stumbled down the road, a car approached, its headlights cutting through the rain. I waved frantically, and the car slowed to a stop. The driver rolled down the window, a concerned expression on his face. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded, still catching my breath. "There's something in my house," I managed to say. He looked at me skeptically, but he opened the door. "Get in, let's get you somewhere safe." I climbed into the car, grateful for the warmth and shelter. As we drove away, I glanced back one last time. The figure was gone, but the sense of dread lingered. I knew that whatever had come into my house wasn't done with me, and I wasn't sure if I would ever truly be safe again. The storm eventually passed, and the police investigated my house. They found no signs of forced entry, and the back door was still locked from the inside. The only evidence of the night's events were the overturned furniture and the shattered dishes. They suggested it was a hallucination, brought on by stress and the storm, but I knew the truth. I moved out of that house the next day, leaving behind everything that reminded me of that night. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I can still hear the tapping, faint and rhythmic, echoing in my mind.